The year is 1996. The turquoise waters and white sands of the Comoros Islands beckoned tourists, a peaceful paradise in the Indian Ocean. But this serenity was about to be violently shattered. An Ethiopian Airways Boeing 767 Flight 961 was hurtling off course, hundreds of miles from its destination. No explosion, no mechanical failure, yet the massive passenger jet was plummeting from the sky, a silent, deadly projectile aimed directly at the shimmering ocean below. This is of an impossible fight for survival at 39,000 feet. It began as a perfectly ordinary day. Ethiopian Airways Flight 961, a modern Boeing 767, departed Addis Ababa for a routine journey across Africa, destined for Abidjan on the Ivory Coast. Aboard were 175 souls, a mix of business travelers, tourists, and families, anticipating a day of stops in Nairobi, Brazzaville, and Lagos. At the controls was Captain Elias Vance, 42, a seasoned pilot with over 11,000 flying hours, accompanied by First Officer Marcus Thorne. Vance knew this route intimately, and the aircraft felt like an extension of himself. The plane carried just enough fuel for the first leg to Nairobi, a standard efficiency practice. The sky was clear, the mood relaxed. Among the passengers was Mr. Omari, a Kenyan businessman heading home to Nairobi who had fought hard to secure his seat. In first class, Ambassador Reginald Davies, the United States Consul General in Bombay, and his wife Charlotte were looking forward to an African safari. A few rows ahead sat Mr. Salim Tariq, a legendary news cameraman and journalist, known for his daring work documenting conflicts and famines across Africa. Tariq, who had even lost an arm in a bomb blast in Ethiopia, was returning to Nairobi after a brief trip. No one on board suspected that within hours, their lives would depend on the unimaginable courage of one man. The flight climbed to 12,000 meters, an uneventful journey. Cabin crew served coffee, conversations hummed. Then, a sudden commotion erupted from the back. 3 young Ethiopian men, all in their mid-20s, surged forward. They were not ordinary passengers. Shouting incomprehensible demands, they pushed past flight attendants, their faces etched with a desperate, unshakable resolve. Passengers froze, some whispering, others simply staring in disbelief as the hijackers burst into the cockpit. Captain Vance, caught off guard, faced them alone. They wielded a fire axe and a fire extinguisher, instruments of safety now twisted into tools of terror. First Officer Thorne was struck, his attempts to resist quickly overwhelmed. 11 of us, they screamed, a chilling lie meant to magnify their threat. Do what we say, or we blow this plane out of the sky. Captain Vance, remarkably, had faced hijackings twice before. In both previous incidents, he had managed to land safely, no one hurt. But this time felt different. The men were more aggressive, more unhinged. The turbulent political situation in the region had made hijackings an unpleasant reality. Between 1990 and 1996, 10 Ethiopian Airways planes had been targeted. But nothing could prepare Vance for the demand that came next. Fly to Australia, they ordered. Captain Vance was stunned. Australia? It was an impossible distance. His aircraft had taken off with just 3.5 hours worth of fuel, barely enough to reach Nairobi. Australia was a 10-hour flight, minimum. He tried to explain, calmly, logically. We don't have enough fuel. We can go to Nairobi, Zanzibar, Dar es Salaam, refuel, then proceed.
But the hijackers wouldn't listen. They pointed to an in-flight magazine confidently declaring that the 767 had an 11-hour maximum flying time. They believed Captain Vance was bluffing, trying to trick them. You carry what you need, they sneered, convinced he was withholding fuel. Their conviction was absolute. This plane could reach Australia. Captain Vance was trapped. If he defied them, they threatened to blow the aircraft apart. If he complied, he knew with horrifying certainty that the plane would inevitably run out of fuel and plunge into the vast, unforgiving ocean. He had to make a choice that would determine the fate of 175 lives. Word of the hijacking spread through the cabin, but not the impossible destination. A nervous calm settled over the passengers, a silent agreement to avoid provoking the hijackers, who, for now, were leaving them alone. Vance knew he couldn't simply give in. His experience told him the hijackers' bomb was likely a bluff, but the fire axe was terrifyingly real. If I am not alive, everybody is not alive, he thought. He decided to call air traffic control. He contacted Addis Ababa, then was passed to Nairobi. Ethiopian 961, we have been hijacked, he transmitted. Orders to divert to Australia. Nairobi Center was aghast. Confirm you are going to land Australia? Gentlemen, we can't make Australia. We only have 2 hours of fuel. We will make a water landing. Vance even patched ATC into the cockpit speakers, hoping the controllers could convince the hijackers. You probably would have to land on the water. Solution is for you to land Mombasa, the controller pleaded. But the hijackers were resolute. We will not negotiate. Follow our instruction or we'll blow the airplane up. Communication ceased. Vance was alone again, the vast ocean stretching ahead, a ticking clock above him.
An hour passed since the hijackers seized control. Passengers whispered, speculating about their unknown destination, assuming negotiations would take place on the ground. But Captain Vance knew there would be no ground. With only a fraction of the fuel needed for Australia, he made a daring decision. He would defy the hijackers. Without their knowledge, he continued flying south, maintaining a course along the African coastline instead of heading east towards Australia. His reasoning was grimly practical. In case anything happens, we will have a place to ditch or land safely, because most of the cities are by the coastline. But the hijackers were watching. A glance out the window revealed land still visible. I still see land. Turn the plane now. Captain Vance had no choice. He swung the massive jet eastward, over the open, boundless Indian Ocean. With land disappearing behind them, he was now truly isolated. But as he turned, another desperate plan began to form in his mind. He didn't have a large chart readily available. It was on First Officer Thorne's side. Instead, he pulled out a small atlas. His eyes scanned the vast blue expanse between the African continent and Madagascar. And there, a cluster of tiny specks, the Comoros Islands, a remote holiday playground, an unlikely savior. I had an idea what that place was, he later recalled. I never heard of the word Comoros before. I started towards it. It was a guess. The Comoros Islands were his last improbable hope for a landing. Hours crawled by. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Mr. Omari tried to read his newspaper, but his concentration shattered. The plane had been flying for over 3 hours, far beyond its initial fuel capacity. Nerves frayed.
Suddenly, a piercing alarm shattered the uneasy silence in the cockpit. The plane had less than 30 minutes of fuel remaining. The inevitable was approaching. Captain Vance knew he had to tell the passengers. He reached for the public address system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your pilot. We have run out of fuel and we are losing an engine at this time. We are going to make a crash landing. A wave of dread washed over the cabin. The calm shattered into a terrifying reality. This was a life or death situation. Then Captain Vance made an unprecedented call. I ask all passengers to react to the hijackers. He was urging them to fight for their lives, to overpower their captors, so he could attempt a controlled landing. It was a monumental risk, but he was out of options. In the cabin, confusion reigned. React against the hijackers? The phrasing was odd, unfamiliar. Most passengers, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty, did not move. They feared provoking the hijackers, who had threatened to blow up the plane. Mr. Salim Tariq, the intrepid journalist, understood. Having faced danger his entire life, he moved through the cabin, trying to rally others. He gestured, whispered, urging them to stand up. With your help, we can take them, he pleaded. But the collective fear was too great. No one was ready to risk precipitous action that could trigger an explosion. Captain Vance remained alone against the hijackers. Then the right engine sputtered, coughed, and fell silent. The aircraft at 39,000 feet immediately slowed. With thrust from only one engine, it began to descend. Captain Vance initiated emergency procedures, starting the APU for basic electrical power. Most passengers remained unaware of the gravity, but Vance knew the plane was in grave danger. He couldn't maintain altitude with one engine. He had to descend to denser air to generate enough lift. The plane dropped, but the Comoros Islands were still within reach, Moroni's airport a fading possibility.
In the cockpit, the hijackers, still refusing to grasp the severity, tried to wrest control, attempting to keep the plane aloft. One of them inadvertently disconnected the autopilot. The 767 lurched wildly. "Don't move! Listen, I am not applying any motion. The aircraft is doing it by itself," Vance desperately tried to explain. "We will drop in the ocean." Captain Vance prayed. He wished he wasn't in this impossible situation, but now that he was, he begged for the strength to save these people. He made one last clear announcement to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please sit down and fasten your seatbelts. Do not panic." People around Ambassador Davies began to pray, say their goodbyes. But his wife Charlotte, a psychiatric nurse, was stoic, practical. "Get up, stand up, get our bag down, pull out your extra glasses, get some food." She focused on survival, on what could be done. Then, the final engine died. Silence. Both massive powerhouses which had propelled the aircraft across continents were now useless. "That's it! Is this what you wanted?" Vance cried out to the hijackers, his voice laced with despair and fury. The cabin grew hot. Lights flickered and died. The $40 million aircraft, once a symbol of modern flight, was now a 100-ton glider. Without engines, the 767 became a powerless beast. The ram air turbine, a small propeller-driven generator, popped out to provide minimal electrical power for basic flight instruments like airspeed. But hydraulic power was gone. The controls grew heavy, sluggish. Critically, Captain Vance could not operate the flaps, which would slow the plane for a safe landing. He would have to ditch at a dangerously high speed. Power off landing is power off ditching, he knew. No pilot was trained for this.
A large passenger jet could glide an impressive distance, 18.5 kilometers for every 1,000 meters of altitude lost. At 6,400 meters, the 767 could travel nearly 120 kilometers. But where? Captain Vance had hoped for Moroni Airport, but in the struggle with the hijackers during the final turn, he lost his bearings. He couldn't visually locate the runway. Precious altitude, precious seconds were lost. A water landing was now his only option. Ditching in the ocean is far more perilous than a ground landing. On land, a plane can slide. In water, it strikes an unyielding surface. A 767's engines, slung low beneath its wings, would act as giant scoops, digging into the water, tearing the plane apart. Panic escalated in the cabin. People screamed. Many, ignoring Captain Vance's earlier instructions, inflated their life jackets inside the plane. This fatal error would prove disastrous for many. Mr. Salim Tariq, still attempting to reason with the hijackers, was rebuffed. "Sit down," they yelled, determined to crash. In the final terrifying seconds, Captain Vance received unexpected help. Some passengers, seeing the hijacker still struggling with the pilot, intervened, forcing them back into their seats. But it was too late. Vance focused on his final, impossible task. "I used to love that airplane," he murmured. "We used to call it Zulu. I said, 'Zulu, you can make it now. I know you'll make it.'" Tourists on the Comoros Islands beach looked up, horrified, as the enormous jet roared towards them. A video camera captured the final surreal moments. At over 370 kilometers per hour, far above normal landing speed, the plane struck the water. The initial impact was deceptively gentle, then a violent, bone-jarring jolt. The 767's left wing struck first, its low-slung engine digging deep, instantly ripping the aircraft from Vance's control. The plane began to cartwheel, disintegrating into 3 major sections. Water, a ravenous beast, surged in from both sides.
Chaos erupted. Those who survived the initial impact struggled to escape, but many who had inflated their life jackets inside the cabin found themselves tragically trapped. Buoyed against the ceiling, they couldn't swim down, couldn't get to their seatbelts, couldn't escape the rapidly sinking fuselage. Mr. Omari, a competitive swimmer, coolly found his seatbelt buckle, pushed free, and swam towards a faint light at the tail of the plane, pulling himself out to the surface, utterly exhausted but alive. Captain Vance, too, found himself floating amidst the debris, unsure of how many, if any, had survived. The Comoros Islands, once a serene paradise, became a scene of heroic rescue. The plane, shattered into pieces, had ditched in miraculously shallow water, preventing it from sinking completely. Locals, tourists, and a group of scuba divers who narrowly missed being hit by the aircraft swarmed to the wreckage. French doctors staying at a nearby resort immediately provided medical aid. Out of 175 people on board, 50 survived. Captain Vance's decision to ditch near the shore, despite losing sight of the Moroni runway, saved dozens of lives. His attempt to land parallel to the waves to reduce impact force was commendable, though the left wing striking first and the powerful engines digging in caused the catastrophic breakup. The premature inflation of life jackets inside the sinking cabin was a tragic factor in many deaths, trapping passengers in their seats or against the ceiling. Mr. Salim Tarek, who had tried to rally the passengers, was standing when the plane crashed and died instantly, a cruel irony for a man who had survived so much. The 3 hijackers, who had refused to sit for the landing, also perished. Investigations revealed they were not part of any terrorist group, but desperate men seeking refugee status in Australia, convinced of the plane's impossible range.
The disaster of Flight 961 highlighted a critical vulnerability: pre-9/11 airline security. For years, experts had argued for fortified cockpit doors, but economic considerations and a perceived low threat often prevailed. This incident, caused by hijackers placing no value on their own lives, tragically demonstrated the urgent need for change. After 9/11, cockpit doors would finally be reinforced across the globe. Captain Elias Vance and First Officer Marcus Thorne received numerous tributes, including a Flight Safety Foundation Award for their extraordinary actions. Vance, despite the horror, continued to fly for Ethiopian Airways. His courage, skill, and desperate ingenuity turned an impossible situation into a survival story against overwhelming odds, a testament to the human spirit in the face of absolute terror.